Jeff Bezos owns Amazon, as you know, and he likes to shoot rockets up into space. Maybe he's got a little rocket envy with Elon Musk because Elon bought Twitter, turned it into X, and it's a bastion of free speech, and it's fun. So Jeff Bezos, after buying the Washington Post, he sort of dwelled in the whole swamp creature kind of Russian collusion BS that sort of ruined journalism going forward. And today, he let all those reporters, all those journalists, all those editors, all those people at the Washington Post that work for him, he let them know that things are now about to change. He then published that email on X, ironically, and we all can see exactly what the Washington Post reporters read when they woke up this morning. Here it is. I shared this note with the Washington Post team this morning. I'm writing to let you know about a change coming to our opinion pages. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. Let me just pause there for a moment. Think about that. This is the Washington Post. This is the paper of record in Washington, D.C., we're told. And it's a huge change. It's a huge shift. It's a huge 180 turn for that newspaper to now be writing about, what's this again? Personal liberties and free markets. Aren't those sort of foundational principles of the United States of America? Why is this even a shift? Why do you even need to write this email? But of course, well, you know the answer to that question. The Washington Post has actually been focusing on everything but personal liberties and free markets. And Jeff Bezos apparently has had enough. Either that or he can just read the room and he can tell where the wind is blowing. And, well, he's letting his own newsroom know exactly which way the wind is blowing from his direction. There was a time when a newspaper, especially one that was a local monopoly, might have seen it as a service to bring to the reader's doorstep every morning a broad-based opinion section that sought to cover all views. Today, the internet does that job. One quick pause here, by the way. The implication here, or the inference, is that the Washington Post was doing that the Washington Post was offering a broad-based opinion section. No, they weren't. Up until a few moments ago, their conservative writer was Jennifer Rubin, right? They weren't offering a broad base of opinions. It was always slanted in one direction. They only allowed a certain kind of Republican right there, and certainly never a pro-Trump Republican or an America First Republican, or by any other definition, a conservative Republican. All right, back to Bezos. I am of America and for America and proud to be so. Our country did not get here by being typical. And a big part of America's success has been freedom in the economic realm and everywhere else. Freedom is ethical. It minimizes coercion and practical. It drives creativity, invention, and prosperity. I offered David Shipley, whom I greatly admire, the opportunity to lead this new chapter. I suggested to him that if his answer wasn't hell yes, then it had to be no. David Shipley is the current editor-in-chief of the Washington Post. He said, here's what we're doing. We're going to be focusing on these two pillars, right? Personal liberties and free markets. Are you on board? Editor-in-chief of the Washington Post, champion of the First Amendment, pretty important personal liberty. Are you on board with me, David? Is your answer hell yes? Because if it's anything but hell yes, the answer is no. After careful consideration, David decided to step away. This is a significant shift. It won't be easy, and it'll require 100% commitment. I respect his decision. We'll be searching for a new opinion editor. Oh, excuse me, he's the opinion editor, not editor-in-chief, to own this new direction. I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America. I also believe these viewpoints are underserved in the current market of ideas and news opinion. I'm excited for us together to fill that void. Jeff. Wow. Wow. I mean, you talk about a vibe shift since the election and since the inauguration and since the advent of an America First agenda on steroids that we've seen from President Trump and the entire Trump cabinet. I would have never in my wildest dreams thought this was possible. that Jeff Bezos made this kind of shift with the Washington Post. And if you think this isn't a big deal, well, just take a look at the reaction from one Philip Bump. Philip Bump, one of the opinion writers at the Washington Post, who apparently has an issue with personal liberties and free markets. That's his reaction. Philip Bump, by the way, spent the last 4 years as an apologist for the Biden administration, running interference, claiming that there's nothing to the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, claiming that Biden is absolutely fine, 100% great capabilities. He's the best president we've ever had. Philip Bump has decided that if the opinion page that he writes for is going to be focusing on personal liberties and free markets, well, that's his contribution to the conversation. It'll be interesting to see if anybody actually hires Philip Bump if he can't handle this. I mean, wow. A little bit more here. Jeff Stein. Now, Jeff Stein is the chief economics reporter for the Washington Post. That's how he describes himself. And he shared a screenshot of the email. There it is. Imagine working at the Washington Post and getting an email from Bezos, Jeff. By the way, good to know that we all now have Jeff's email address. If you want to reach out to Mr. Bezos at the Washington Post, it's jeff.bezos@washingtonpost.com. That's jeff.bezos@washingtonpost.com. Maybe I should send him my resume. I'd love to write a few op-eds over there now, if this is really the direction they're going. You see, this is the email. It's the exact same language that Bezos shared. And Mr. Stein, the chief economics reporter, not just any economics reporter, but chief. I think that means that he wears a headdress with feathers. He says this is a massive encroachment by Jeff Bezos into the Washington Post opinion section today. Makes clear dissenting views will not be published or tolerated there. I still have not felt encroachment on my journalism on the news side of coverage, but if Bezos tries interfering with the news side, I will be quitting immediately and letting you know. Noted. You know, and I hate to do this, but I wrote a book about this. It's called Shameless Liars, How Trump Defeated the Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant. I didn't predict this, but I do spend a couple of chapters at the very beginning laying out how we got here, how freedom of the press was first imagined by our founders. And I spent a lot of time in one chapter talking about the myth of objectivity. There was a time right up until about the late 19th century in America where newspapers didn't pretend to be objective. They didn't pretend to not take a point of view. You had newspapers owned by Mr. Pulitzer. You had newspapers owned by Mr. Hearst. You had newspapers owned by various interests. And the consumers, us, we, the citizens, the voters, the people that freedom of the press is actually there to protect, we would know which newspaper was which. Right? We knew that if we bought this newspaper, it was owned by a guy who had, conservative principles and was aligned with the Whigs, let's say, or later in the 19th century, the Republican Party. Whereas if we bought this newspaper, we knew that it was a guy who was aligned with the Democrats. He was pro-slavery, this guy, because he's a Democrat. That's how we, the consumers, used to consume our news. This whole idea of objectivity, it's a myth that was created by the newspaper owners when they put together a thing called the Associated Press. They pooled their money together to save when they had to send reporters to cover the Spanish-American War down in Mexico. They didn't want to spend money to send each and every reporter, so they created a thing called the Associated Press, and the dispatches they would send didn't have any political bias, so that the newspaper owners could use them in their collective respective newspapers. There's no such thing as a newspaper owner not injecting his opinion and his direction onto the content of the paper that he owns. We see this right now, by the way, in cable news, right? Rupert Murdoch is a political conservative. Now, he's from Australia and he lives in New York and London, so he's not, a conservative like you and I are. But Rupert Murdoch hired Roger Ailes to create a cable network that would better reflect conservative ideas because one didn't exist anywhere. That's how Fox News was born. And we, the consumers, know that when we turn to Fox News, we're getting news and opinion from one perspective. And if we turn to MSNBC, we know that we're getting it from another perspective. There's nothing wrong with that. The Republic did not fall apart or get shattered. See, these guys hide behind this myth of objectivity and treat it as a costume, as a camouflage, as a disguise. They claim that they have no point of view or perspective. No, we're all about just the facts. But then the second their owner says, well, this is what our opinion page is going to be, they all go ape. And it's a great reveal. It tells you exactly who they are, actually. It tells you that it was all a lie to begin with. There was no objectivity there. They just hate the fact that their owner now specifically says, this is our point of view. This is our perspective. I own this sandbox. You want to play in my sandbox? You play by my rules because they're my toys. In fact, it's my sand. In fact, it's my box. You can always go somewhere else if you'd like. That would be one of those free market principles that Jeff Bezos wants them to talk about. You know who's really hurting because of this? Sadly, not only the people who work at the Washington Post, but also this guy. This guy is a social media influencer. And by the hairless chest, you can tell that he is a liberal. Hey, Kamala Harris loving liberal. This isn't the Harry Sisson guy, right? Because honestly, I don't even think Harry Sisson has girly pecs like this guy does. But there you go. There's his manly hairless chest. And you see he just got a brand new tattoo. This brand new tattoo is fresh. He's showing it off. Let's zoom in on the tattoo that he just got right there. By the way, tattoo on the rib cage, that can be painful, especially when it's kind of big like that, a little expansive. He must have had some tequila before he got it done. Let's zoom in on that tattoo that he just got on his rib cage, shall we? Ah, yes. Ah, yes. This absolute moron literally got the Washington Post's virtue signaling hysterical left-wing anti-Trump motto, democracy dies in darkness, which, by the way, also happens to be a complete and total fraud. He got that tattooed on his body. It's like getting the Hillary Clinton I'm with her logo tattooed. You know, oh, we're going to shatter the ceiling. There's no way Hillary can lose. Dude, it's a bad day for him. As the Washington Post takes a little bit of a shift. Yeah, it's not your father's Washington Post anymore. It's not your Watergate Washington Post anymore. It's not your Russian collusion Washington Post anymore. The opinion page is going to focus on two principles: personal liberties and the free market. In other words, the Washington Post is now suddenly, apparently, going to be an American newspaper.